Hello and welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Bajo.
I'm Junglist.
Packed show this week, Jung, with two popular game franchises getting a total makeover.
That's right, the turn-based classic Fire Emblem gets the DS treatment.
And perhaps the biggest of them all, Halo goes from shooter to strategy in Halo Wars.
Plus we look at one of the all-time classic gaming systems, the SNES, and Street Fighter 4 touches down.
And I'll be wrestling a shark, but first, can you guess the game for this week? Go read the news!
Good game! One of the games industry's most historic developers, Midway Games, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the US in the past week. The creators of classic games like Mortal Kombat, Defender, Robotron, and NBA Jam have seen better days, with the American arm of the company proving insolvent against their mounting debts. The Chapter 11 bankruptcy should mean that Midway will be able to continue trading into the future, providing that they can pay off their creditors, so we may not have seen the last of games like MK vs. DC Universe. The company also maintains operations in Europe and the United Kingdom. However, the bankruptcy of Midway America will reportedly not affect their international business. Square Enix, the Japanese game developer behind the Final Fantasy series, have initiated a takeover bid for British publisher Eidos Interactive. Eidos, the owners of the Tomb Raider franchise, have struggled through falling share prices over the past few months, and the news that Square Enix are interested in acquiring the troubled company couldn't have come at a better time.
You'd be amazed how persuasive I can be.
With the news raising investor confidence in Eidos' share value almost immediately. So far, Eidos shareholders, including 20% owner Warner Brothers, have given their blessing to the Square Enix Eidos acquisition, and although the bid didn't have majority approval at the time of reporting, it looks to be a promising move for both companies.
Good game!
From the makers of a good game uber favorite, Advance Wars, comes Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, a second remake of the very first game, if that makes sense.
Fire Emblem series has always been very popular in Japan, but it took until the turn of the century to make it into the West, and that was largely thanks to Fire Emblem characters Marth and Roy just being really powerful to play in Super Smash Bros. Melee.
Here, you play as Marth, the son of a king, and he's on a mission to do a whole bunch of stuff.
Stuff?
Yeah, we kind of glazed over the story.
Yeah, it's a bit convoluted, but the gist of it all is you're on a quest to win back your kingdom, and you need a whole bunch of followers to do it.
Battles are similar to Advance Wars, with a lot more classes, leveling, and gear collection. Fire Emblem's main difference is that when you lose one of your characters in battle, they're gone, that's it, they have ceased to be.
They've expired and gone to meet their maker.
His metabolic processes are now history.
They've kicked the bucket.
He shuffled off his mortal coil.
They are an ex-teammate.
So you get sad when you lose a teammate that you've leveled up and given heaps of gear to.
Yeah, it's a bit depressing, and it's those diagonal attacks that always get me, you know? It's just hard to remember to cover all of your units from all the diagonals.
I'm constantly mangled by diagonal angles, John. A main criticism with the Wii version was that there was no point in having a rock, paper, scissors system because Soth, the main character, was just so overpowered.
Here, Marth is pretty powerful, but still vulnerable, so you need to keep your tanks up front and your healers close, and this is especially important in a bottleneck.
In general, I find the gameplay a little bit messy, you know, it's not that clear tactical feel that you get with Advance Wars, and also it can be quite tedious moving all these units, especially because the default menu, once you've moved them, isn't wait, and that's just silly, John.
On the other hand, there's a certain joy to be had in the role-playing aspect of the game, and it can be kind of fun storming in with your group of merry men, especially for a game that's really 2 decades old. On the other hand, though, it does kind of chuck you right into the deep end here. The tutorials are just still screens that do very little to ease a new gamer into the finer details of combat and classes.
Yep, you definitely need to be an RPG veteran. This is the first Fire Emblem to have an online component. There's an online store and also battle mode, which is 5 vs 5, but it's not as much fun as it sounds.
My main beef is with the weapons deteriorating over time. Like I always say, there's just nothing fun about weapon maintenance.
Let it go, John, let it go.
Never, it's just stupid. I play games so I can use weapons because they're cool and it's fun, but I don't want to learn about proper care and maintenance. At least the rest of the game's good. I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I'm giving it 7.5.
Good game.
Aren't you meant to be job hunting?
I am. You see, the media says shooters make you violent and racing games make you bad drivers, so I figured if they're right, I could use my positive video game skills positively.
Did you drink window cleaner again?
This'll be good for gamers. You'll see. You'll thank me. This'll be for all gamer kind.
Good game.
We looked at Street Fighter a few weeks ago in the arcades, where I won, but now we've got the console version in our hands and it's time to check out what it has to offer.
For those of you who haven't yet gotten to the arcade, Street Fighter 4 is more a sparring, opportunity spotting kind of fighter. In some ways, kind of going back to its roots like Street Fighter 2. In fact, the lip syncing is just about as bad.
I am the Red Cyclone.
Focus attacks are the main reason for this, and you can perform these by pressing medium punch and kick, and then releasing quickly to do a counter.
Or you can hold it a bit longer, which will force your enemy to the ground. Or you can hold it even longer and perform an unblockable attack.
This gives you time to either get in a quick shot or plan your next attack. You can also use focus attacks to cancel out of a special move. There are 2 power bars to play with. One is the EX power bar, which fills up the more damage you do, and you can spend this by pulling off a more powerful special move, or super move.
You've also got a revenge bar which fills up as you take damage. And when this ability is available, you can perform a very cinematic Naruto-inspired ultra move. Some of these are quite hard to pull off, especially the ones that require charging up. This, along with armor-breaking moves, means that a good match will see you boxing and jabbing backwards and forwards for ages. So it does get quite complicated on the expert level, but you do need to have a reasonable understanding of how it all works to beat the boss, even on the easy settings. Or you can just spam Blanca's electricity. That seems to do the job as well. What did you think of the controls, John?
Well, generally it's pretty hard to press 2 buttons simultaneously without your hand over the controller like this. Left bumper is for pressing all 3 buttons at once. The 360's D-pad might let you down a little bit. PS3 is alright, and some of the moves that have longer combos and require 3 buttons pressed at the end of it can get a bit tricky.
You can reassign them, which is good. And I don't know about you, John, but I've always been a D-pad man myself, except for Street Fighter. It's the one exception where a joystick actually makes it a better game.
And how about that animation style? It's very unique. It's kind of like a cross between water painting and cell shading or something.
Yeah, there's even calligraphy influence in some of the moves and in the titles.
The console, and we assume later PC versions, all have extra characters, challenge modes, and promise of downloadable costume packs. There's even rumors of a recorded game feature on the way. So, Badge, is there really enough here to justify a new sequel?
There's so many Ryu and Ken clones now. I was kind of hoping for something more with the new characters. But, you know, Street Fighter is a game that is hard to master, but it makes you want to master it, and that's a good thing. I'm giving it 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
It's an elegant, balanced fighting system with stacks of depth. I'm giving it a 9 too.
Good game.
Mind! But it was a retro classic!
Here's a retro classic. You're fired.
Good game.
What are you doing?
John, we've been doing this for 5 series now. Same format. It's time to spice things up a little.
I don't think you understand what the term jump the shark actually means.
Well, what do you suggest?
Well, before resorting to the elaborate stunts, most shows try other things, like the unresolved sexual tension. Or introducing a new character.
To the interview room! So, where do you see the RTS genre right now?
Well, Halo Wars isn't out yet.
Oh, it's about a 7.
Do you have any objection to lolcats?
What's there to object to? They procure many epic lols.
The opening solo in Dragon Force. Go! If you were in Molten Core as a tank, what kind of gear would you need?
You need gear with at least 100 plus fire resist, especially if you want any chance of beating Ragnaros.
If one were classed as a ninja, What does that say about their morals?
They're probably a pirate in disguise trying to be a ninja.
If I were to say, Zomb Groffle BRB AFK LOL, what exactly would that mean?
You'd be excited, and then you'd be laughing, leaving, and laughing some more.
And what reviewing experience do you have?
I've reviewed video games for magazines and online media.
If I were to tell you to GTFO, what would you do?
I'd smack you down with my power sword.
I would get up and leave, but then I'd also find you really rude.
If we were to give you the job, what would you bring to the show?
Elite Halo skills.
Personal hygiene.
Yes, Blades.
Ray's got the job. Welcome to the team.
Thanks for having me, noobs.
Good game.
Video games have long inspired gamers to create art, from personalized signatures and avatars to desktop wallpapers. But it can be taken a step further. We look at 3 artists who draw their inspiration from their love of video games.
My name's Ella Barclay. I'm an artist and I've worked with 3 other artists, Kelly Robson, Adrienne Tasker and Benjamin Backhouse, making this project behind me, which is called One More Go, One More Go. I guess it's just the idea of trying to make things fit together. I still think sometimes I'm quite spatially retarded, and when I'm like packing a dishwasher or trying to rearrange my closet and I'm like, think of Tetris, think of Tetris. I think a lot of office workers around the CBD are probably working really hard, but then they might also be checking their Facebook and playing online games and messing around a bit. And we just sort of like this idea of them coming out into the street on their sort of break and then connecting with something that they'd normally be seeing at their computer terminals where they're spending like 8 hours a day.
What's your earliest gaming memory?
I remember playing Tetris on my parents' really old computer, but shortly thereafter getting a Game Boy and playing it on that. Tetris is just so good.
You see, I remember that when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to have a Game Boy because my parents were too stingy. So instead, they got us dodgy rip-offs of the Game Boy that only came with Tetris. And they were about $2 each from bargain stores, and anytime they broke down, we'd just go get another one. They sounded horrible as well.
That's what this work's about, you know, just starting again, making a mess and then starting again, which just sounds, yeah, exactly like that.
My name's Rebecca Murphy. I'm 27 years old and I spend all my time making art and playing computer games.
When you get an idea that you want to represent a certain video game, how do you actually execute that idea?
Well, I think about the video game for a while and then I think up the kind of visual things that people think of. Like with these kind of games, the visuals are really simple, so it's more interesting to make an artwork about that than it would be if the visuals were more complex, because you've got to use your imagination more. I decided to portray them this way because my art style, my personal art style, is based around stylized women, pop surreal kind of thing. I wanted to bring that style and mix it with the memories that I have of playing these games.
I see that you've portrayed Princess Peach as a bit of a dominatrix. What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, Princess Peach wasn't originally called Princess Peach, she was called Princess Toadstool. And then they changed it a couple of games in because people like Princess Peach more than they like Princess Toadstool. And I think that kind of gives her a whole hidden identity. So I thought, well, what kind of identity would she have that she wouldn't want all the little kiddies playing the game to know about? And that's where that came in.
What kind of response do you get from these artworks?
Mostly positive. Everyone seems to have their own specific favourite. My personal favourite is the Space Invaders one. So everyone has their own special memories of playing these games, and I think that that's part of the reaction that they have to them.
Do you have any plans to create more video game inspired artworks?
Definitely. When I get the inspiration, I just have to make them.
My name's Tom Langlands. I'm a painter. I paint what you'd say is probably minimal hard edge abstraction. Those old school games sort of, to me, represent a time in my life when I was probably in my early teens. Good times at friends' houses and things like that. I guess they represent a time that, you can't go back to, but you look fondly back on it. Especially the old school ones, I really like the connections and the parallels to painting, and some of them are very simplified in that they were sort of late 70s, so they couldn't really be much more graphic than they were, and they're made up of pixels and blocks and things like that. And my work is about big blocks of colour and flat colour, and also those games are quite bright in their colours. All those elements plus the gaming element really sort of made it quite interesting.
What kind of response did you get from people when your work went on display?
Yeah, I got a good response. A lot of people really dug it in the sense that they grew up with those games and there was a big nostalgic sort of presence there. And then also people that probably didn't even know they were games, just purely from an aesthetic point of view, really got into them.
As more and more artists combine their love for art and passion for gaming, maybe it won't be long before we see all our gaming favourites hanging in the National Gallery.
When the first word in something's name is super, there's an expectation that it should live up to, or perhaps even surpass, its superlative title. Fortunately for us, in the world of console gaming, there's one such name that does exactly that: the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Synonymous with groundbreaking technology, classic gameplay, and iconic characters, the Super Nintendo, or SNES for short, was released in Japan in ye olde days of 1990, although it would take another 2 years to make it to the rest of the world. The console was released in a few different designs, but for now, let's just check out our one. This model is easily the most aesthetically pleasing of the bunch, with some sleek, rounded corners and a classic grey body. For its time, the SNES control pad was also the most advanced ever produced. It was the first gamepad to introduce shoulder buttons, and its design remains influential to this very day, with the PlayStation controller in particular taking plenty of inspiration from its classic layout. But of course, it wasn't the way that it looked that made the SNES a classic, it was the way it played. Take this for example. It's Super Mario World, and it was one of the console's launch games. In fact, for a long time, it actually came bundled with the console. So, if you ever owned a SNES, this game was pretty much impossible to avoid. Not that you'd ever want to avoid it, since it was a game design masterpiece. Produced by Nintendo's resident genius Shigeru Miyamoto, Super Mario World took the Italian plumber to Dinosaur Island, where he once again had to rescue a kidnapped Princess Peach from the terrible terrapin Bowser. It had more than 70 levels, all of them fun, and it even introduced us to a new character, Yoshi. Mario would have plenty of other outings on the 16-bit console, including a few spin-offs that would become classics in their own right. Super Mario Kart was one of the best of these, and it was also the first time the Mushroom Kingdom crew would take to the track. Using the SNES's advanced texture and scaling rotation capabilities, a feature that was called Mode 7, Mario Kart's tracks were almost three-dimensional, an effect that was innovative for its time. Mario Kart also introduced us to the joys of shooting off red shells, banana peels and lightning bolts, and the racing wasn't too bad either. Apart from Mode 7, the SNES had some other unique technical features, like the Super FX chip, which allowed the console to produce some true 3D graphics. The Super FX chip was only used in a handful of games, the best of which was Starwing, or Star Fox, as it's known internationally. Starwing saw you controlling an anthropomorphic fighter pilot named Fox McCloud on a mission to shoot down a maniacal space emperor's plans for galactic domination. It represents one of the biggest leaps in 3D graphics on a home console, and besides that, it was great fun. During the Super Nintendo's reign, another two of Nintendo's best-loved franchises received the 16-bit treatment. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past set you on a quest to defeat the evil Ganondorf, although this time you had to conquer two worlds, Dark Hyrule and Light Hyrule. Meanwhile, bounty hunter Samus Aran's Super Nintendo adventure, Super Metroid, saw you controlling the femme fatale through an alien-infested planetoid, where she encountered some of her fiercest enemies, including the space pirate leader, Ridley. To Towards the end of the SNES's life cycle, a small game developer from Twycross, England, by the name of Rare, came out with one of the console's biggest hits. It was Donkey Kong Country, and it was the first console game to use pre-rendered 3D models to create its graphics. As a result, it looked amazing, and it had gameplay to match. It revitalized some of Nintendo's oldest characters, introduced us to his new sidekick named Diddy Kong, and it also helped the SNES to maintain its popularity long after the Sony PlayStation was released in 1995. The SNES reinvented the entire Mario back catalogue with Super Mario All-Stars. It also had the first ever home console version of Capcom's Street Fighter II, and it would feature many of Squaresoft's greatest role-playing games, including Final Fantasy VI, Secret of Mana, and Chrono Trigger. Many of the best SNES games have already popped up on the Wii's Virtual Console service, so if you missed out on the 16-bit era, you can still experience these classics via the wonders of digital distribution. But of course, if you want the authentic SNES experience, there's no substitute for the original. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a princess to save.
Given the phenomenal success of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, gamers were left asking what were they thinking after playing Mario is Missing. The game was an attempt to tap into the edutainment sector and saw Luigi trying to rescue not a kidnapped Princess Peach, but a missing Mario. Peach did make an appearance in the game as a tourist booth operator who quizzed Luigi about artifacts he collected as he traveled around the globe in search of his brother. But Mario is Missing fooled no one and taught them next to nothing. Instead of offering the great gameplay of most Mario titles, as well as learning important facts about the planet, it was a hodgepodge of dreadful ideas, badly put together, which only left gamers asking what were they thinking.
Good game! A few months ago, we all learned that Ensemble Studios, the makers of the Age of Empires series, was going to close down after its last game, Halo Wars. It's a bit confusing to everyone, really, because all the Age games have been profitable and good, and it also begs the question, just what's wrong with Halo Wars?
Well, finally it's here and we can play the last game from a great studio. But a lot could go wrong for Halo Wars. It's a strategy game set in the Halo universe, exclusive to the 360. Halo has always been the everyman shooter, one everyone can enjoy. And strategy games are complicated by nature. One could say it's the accessible franchise meets the inaccessible genre.
Build up our base and army.
So they've compromised, with only a few tiers on the tech tree and a maximum number of buildings per base.
Reactor complete.
They've kept it simple. A population cap means you need to think more about what you actually deploy, and after a while you start seeing population as a resource.
It's great to finally be able to see Halo units fighting en masse, and they've definitely done the Halo universe justice. Cutscenes look fantastic. Human units are a little bit stronger, but the Covenant has a larger population cap. You'll see all the same units, buildings, vehicles, and even same maps as Halo.
Yeah, the first time I saw a Spartan snap down a Wraith with his laser, I was like, hey man, nice shot.
Yeah, it was a pretty hard shot to pull off back in Halo.
Spartans can also hijack enemy vehicles, which is cool. And on the whole, they've been very inventive with the levels. For example, there's one with a scarab head lasering all over the battlefield, and another one where you're on the hull of your ship and there's an electric ring that passes backwards and forwards.
It gets really good halfway through when they introduce the Flood. Yeah, I think it's pretty much their best campaign since Age of Empires 2.
Yeah, and you know, with real-time strategy, you can't cater for everyone. There's such a broad range of skill out there. And I think that this is on the simpler end of that spectrum.
Well, the real challenge for making a strategy game on a console comes from its control scheme. You need to be able to issue lots of commands quickly and accurately.
Good thing they've designed the interface from the ground up with the console in mind, focusing on radial menus and shortcuts, and generally, Jung, I found the shortcuts were pretty good.
Yeah, well, the problem is when you want to micromanage your units in a battle. The cursor is too slow to micro one unit onto one unit, and you don't want to select all units much. There are times when that's a really bad idea. The first time you send units charging into your own grenade fire, you think, gee, I wish I had a mouse.
But I think, Jung, anyone that has spent some time with RTS on a PC are going to find little things like not being able to click the mini-map excruciating.
It's a problem that every strategy game for console has, and your only consolation is when you go online, your opponent's in the same boat.
True to their style, each side has 3 sub-factions, each with their own special abilities and units. And Zom, God powers, aren't these great, Jung? For a price, you can just unleash hell with an orbital laser or just freeze enemies in their place.
Yeah, in this side of the game, it kind of doesn't even matter that it's so simple because the unit-counter-unit system is broad enough, so I think when you go online, you could get pretty high level of skill in this game. Again though, if you're the type of person with skill and strategy, you're probably not going to be wasting your time on the 360.
See, I don't know about that, Jung. For me, it's fun, and I did have fun in the multiplayer. The only thing is, though, I wanted to play as the Flood, and you can't use them at all. At least the Covenant's good, but still.
Final thoughts?
I think they did a good job with the limitations, you know? It looks great, it plays great, and it is great. As far as console RTS goes, it's one of the best. I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, it is fun. I think you can get a good 7 hours out of the single player, a good deal more if you take it online. And whether or not the control scheme is to your liking, that's up to you. You might want to try it out first, and there is a demo available. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
And I'll give it 7 rubber chickens.
We met some of the team from Ensemble last year at E3, and our interview with them is online.
Why don't we put the lady down and talk about this man to freak?
As you wish.
Good game.
So did you guess the game for this week?
It was the Great Guiana Sisters, but if you guessed an early Mario game, we forgive you, as this game was withdrawn from sale when it was released in 1987 due to its similarity with the famous Plumber's Adventures. Instead of using mushrooms to power up, the sisters consumed balls that turned their hair into colorful mohawks. The English version of the game, released for Commodore 64, even had the tagline, "The Brothers Are History."
Despite its withdrawal from the market, Great Guiana Sisters has gone on to achieve cult status, and ironically, this year an updated remake will be released on the Nintendo DS. How the wheel turns in Gameland, Jung.
Next week, it's Aussie, Aussie, Aussie! Games, that is. The RPG meets Bejeweled Puzzle Quest was a worldwide hit for Melbourne-based Good Game game developers Infinite Interactive. Can they match or even surpass it with the sequel Galactrix? Plus a look at Aussies making serious games. They aim to educate as well as entertain.
Don't forget to jump on the forums and join in the conversation. There's lots of stuff on there that we can't fit in the show as well.
Till next time, gamers, Junglist out.
Bajo out.